He had the face of a movie star, charm of a born leader, and the loyalty of the men who would follow him into hell. His name was Joachim Peiper, once hailed as the most handsome officer in Hitler's SS, admired even by his enemies for his courage and charisma. But behind that calm smile was a man responsible for some of the most brutal massacres of World War II. And 3 decades after the war, when the world had almost forgotten him, Joachim Peiper, once the most handsome face of Hitler's SS, was burned alive. Joachim Peiper was born in 1915 in Berlin. His father, a resentful former army officer, taught him that Germany's defeat in World War I was not a failure, but a betrayal. For young Joachim, that bitterness became the spark that fueled his ambition. By 18, Peiper joined the Hitler Youth, and soon after, the SS, a force built on loyalty, ideology, and ruthlessness. His discipline, charm, and striking looks made him stand out. In 1934, at Nuremberg Rally, Peiper caught Himmler's attention. Himmler was obsessed with the idea of an ideal Aryan, and to him, Peiper seemed almost like a living poster boy. He wasn't the tallest or the most muscular, but his sharp features and self-assured presence made him stand out. Within years, he was no ordinary recruit, but Himmler's personal adjutant, serving at the heart of Nazi power. By 1938, Peiper was trusted with sensitive missions and exposed to the darkest machinery of the regime, including visits to concentration camps and mass executions in occupied Poland. He saw how the system worked, and he never looked away. To Himmler, he was loyal, efficient, and indispensable. To the outside world, he was a rising star. But Peiper didn't want to stay behind a desk. He wanted to prove himself in battle. And in 1940, he got his wish. In May 1940, during the Battle of France, Peiper was appointed platoon leader in the motorized regiment of the Leibstandarte SS Adolf Hitler. Peiper quickly proved himself. His willingness to lead from the front, to expose himself to danger alongside his men, earned him respect and recognition. During one fierce engagement near Wattenberg, Peiper's platoon captured a French artillery battery under heavy fire. For his audacity and leadership, he was awarded the Iron Cross Second Class. Only a month later, on the 19th of June 1940, Peiper received the Iron Cross First Class for his continued bravery and aggressive command, a distinction that marked him as far more than just a political favourite. Still, his time at the front during the French campaign was brief. After the French campaign, he returned to Himmler's staff, but soon pleaded to go back to combat. By 1941, he was commanding his own unit on the Eastern Front, a front that turned men into monsters. On the Eastern Front, Peiper developed a style of leadership that was aggressive, daring, and often reckless. He inspired loyalty by fighting alongside his men, sharing their hardships, and never asking them to take risks he wouldn't take himself. During the Third Battle of Kharkov, Peiper's battalion carried out a daring and perilous rescue, breaking through Soviet lines to free the encircled 320th Infantry Division, along with its sick and wounded. In a letter home, Peiper later described how his men fought hand-to-hand against elite Soviet ski troops, proof of just how desperate and brutal the rescue had been. For this daring rescue mission, on March 9, 1943, Joachim Peiper was awarded the Knight's Cross of the Iron Cross, practically the highest military decoration in Nazi Germany. Himmler personally congratulated Peiper on his achievement. He said, "My dear Joachim, heartfelt congratulations for the Knight's Cross. I am proud of you." But during this rescue mission, Peiper discovered that a small German medical unit that was left behind in the village of Krasnaya Poliana was killed and mutilated by the Soviet partisans. Blinded by rage, Peiper ordered a brutal reprisal. His men set Krasnaya Poliana on fire and executed its inhabitants, reducing the village to ashes in an act of vengeance. But this was just the beginning of Peiper's brutality. On 12th of February 1943, SS troops under Peiper's command occupied the Ukrainian villages of Yefremovka and Semyonovka. 4 days later, on the morning of the 16th of February, a German aircraft carrying several high-ranking SS officers attempted to land near Semyonovka, but came under fire from Soviet soldiers or local partisans. 2 SS officers were wounded in the attack. That same evening, Peiper retaliated with devastating brutality. According to multiple accounts, he ordered both villages destroyed and their inhabitants executed. The next 2 days turned into an orgy of violence and fire. In Yefremovka, around 240 men were locked inside the village church, which was then set ablaze. No one survived. Across Yefremovka and Semyonovka, 872 civilians were murdered between the 16th and 17th of February 1943, though the true number may have been even higher, as people from surrounding hamlets had sought refuge there. After Yefremovka and Semyonovka were reduced to ashes, Peiper's unit earned a grim nickname among both friend and foe, the Blowtorch Battalion. Peiper himself was proud of the brutal reputation his men had earned. In his own writings, he coldly described fear as a weapon. Our reputation precedes us as a wave of terror and is one of our best weapons. Even old Genghis Khan would gladly have hired us as assistants. To him, these acts weren't crimes, they were part of warfare. To the Nazi propaganda machine, however, he was simply the model warrior, handsome, loyal, and unstoppable. In September 1943, during operations in northern Italy after the collapse of Mussolini's regime, his battalion was involved in another notorious event, the Boves Massacre. Peiper and his battalion were stationed near the Italian town of Boves, when Italian partisans captured 2 German soldiers in September 1943. Peiper threatened to destroy the entire town unless they were released. The partisans complied, handing the prisoners back unharmed, but Peiper carried out his threat anyway. His men killed 24 civilians and set the town ablaze. The message was clear: resistance, no matter how small, would be crushed without mercy. After Italy, Peiper returned to the Eastern Front, where the war had become a desperate struggle. His division fought in Ukraine, clashing with the advancing Red Army in bloody battles that drained men and machines alike. Peiper gained a reputation as being a daring and audacious fighter who did not shy away from confrontation, and certainly was not a man prone to retreat. This was all well and good for him personally, but his overly aggressive style of leadership resulted in very high casualty rates among his men, and left him open to allegations that he cared more about enhancing his personal reputation than he did about the welfare of his men. But despite this, those who survived were fiercely loyal to him, with many of them regarding him as a charismatic leader. By 1944, Peiper's ruthless reputation made him the perfect choice for Hitler's final gamble, the Ardennes Offensive, also known as the Battle of the Bulge. Peiper led a powerful armored column, Kampfgruppe Peiper, tasked with breaking through American lines. It was a mission perfectly suited to Peiper's aggressive style. On December 17, 1944, near the Belgian town of Malmedy, his men encountered over 100 American artillery troops. The Americans, caught off guard, surrendered. What happened next would stain Peiper's name forever. Instead of being taken into captivity, the prisoners were fired upon with machine guns. 84 American soldiers were killed in the snow. Survivors later described playing dead, crawling through bodies, and running across the fields under gunfire to escape. The massacre spread like wildfire through Allied lines. Orders soon followed: take no SS prisoners. As Peiper's unit pushed through Belgium, it left a brutal trail. Villages like Stavelot and Trois Ponts burned, civilians executed, and prisoners gunned down. By the end, his men were blamed for more than 400 murders. But the advance collapsed under Allied air power and fierce resistance. Surrounded and out of fuel, Peiper abandoned his tanks and fled on foot through the forests. The Battle of the Bulge collapsed, and with it, Peiper's last chance at glory. His daring style had brought him recognition, but now his name was inseparably linked to massacres. When the Reich finally fell in 1945, Peiper was captured in Bavaria. He was no longer a commander, just a war criminal in handcuffs. The Americans knew who he was. Survivors of Malmedy identified him immediately. At Dachau, the Malmedy Massacre trial began in 1946. 74 SS soldiers stood accused, Peiper at the center. Witnesses described the snowfield killings in chilling detail. The verdict was inevitable: death by hanging. But global politics changed everything. As the Cold War began, West Germany became an ally, and executing SS officers was suddenly inconvenient. Under pressure, Peiper's sentence was reduced, first to life, then to 35 years. In 1956, after serving just 11 years, Joachim Peiper walked free. West Germany was rebuilding, but Peiper could not escape his past. Peiper landed a job at Porsche, but when his SS past surfaced, protests erupted and he was fired. He then joined Volkswagen, but history repeated itself, exposed again, protested again, and fired once more. Yet he never repented. In a 1967 interview, he said, "I was a National Socialist and I still am." These words were not careless. They revealed how little he had changed. He criticized modern Germany as weak, calling it a province of Europe. He expressed disdain for the materialism of his fellow countrymen. To his former comrades, he was a loyal soldier who had suffered for Germany. To the rest of the world, he was a ghost from a nightmare that refused to die. By the 1970s, tired of being hounded, Peiper and his wife moved to Traves, a tiny village in France where no one knew him, or so he thought. Peiper had been living quietly in Traves, a small French village, surviving on his military pension and translating military history books for a German publisher. But that peace shattered when a local shopkeeper grew suspicious of the quiet German with a heavy accent and contacted the communist newspaper L'Humanité. After an investigation, they confirmed that the man living peacefully in Traves was none other than the convicted war criminal, Joachim Peiper. Overnight, leaflets spread through the village. "A Nazi war criminal lives among us." On June 20th, in the evening, communist activists spray graffiti and go door to door in Traves to denounce the presence of the war criminal in the city. Leaflets were scattered across the village, calling for action. Overnight, the peace Peiper had cultivated shattered. Villagers who had once looked at him as just another quiet German now whispered about his past. The man living on the edge of town was not just a retiree, he was a former SS colonel whose name was tied to massacres across Europe. For veterans of the resistance, for survivors of occupation, the idea that an SS officer could live comfortably in their country was an insult. Political groups seized on it, launching a campaign to have him expelled. Peiper complained to local police. They agreed to provide a guard for his house, but only during the day. At night, he was alone. The West German embassy in Paris advised him to leave France, at least temporarily, until the controversy settled. But Peiper refused. France's veterans were furious. Journalists hunted him. Instead of lying low, Peiper gave interviews, mocking his critics. In an interview, Peiper said he is an innocent man who had paid for his war crimes with 12 years of prison. He also said that in 1940, French people weren't brave, that's why I'm here. Those words sealed his fate. As threats poured in, his wife and children fled to Germany. Peiper stayed behind, insisting he would wait for things to calm down. But nothing calmed down. By early July, the threats intensified. Anonymous letters and phone calls warned him that his house would be set on fire. Leaflets denounced him. Neighbors whispered louder. For a man who had once commanded thousands, who had walked the halls of power with Himmler himself, it must have felt strange to be cornered by faceless voices promising vengeance. Peiper, who had lived through the Russian front and American artillery bombardments, perhaps this felt like nothing more than intimidation. The night of July 13th, 1976, was warm and still in the village of Traves. But on the outskirts of this quiet commune, one house sat in uneasy silence. Inside was Joachim Peiper, once a colonel of the Waffen-SS, now a man under siege by whispers, threats, and decades of hatred. He had received letters warning him that his home would be set ablaze. Phone calls promised vengeance. Yet he stayed, armed with a revolver and a shotgun, determined not to flee. Sometime after 11:30 p.m., neighbors reported strange noises, what sounded like gunshots echoing from the direction of Peiper's house. Minutes later, flames lit the night sky. By midnight, the home was engulfed. Firefighters arrived too late. In the ruins, a body was found. It was so badly burned that it had shrunk to 60 centimeters in length. Identification was nearly impossible. Near the remains lay a revolver, a shotgun with empty cartridges and fragments of ammunition. In the garden, investigators noted bullet marks near an oak tree about 11 meters away from the house, as if shots had been fired outward, perhaps in self-defense. Yet there was no evidence that anyone had returned fire. The autopsy revealed that the victim had died not from gunshot wounds but from smoke inhalation. Death had come through suffocation, trapped as flames consumed the house. Days after the fire, a militant group calling themselves the Avengers released a statement. "The Peiper case, it's us. It is more than just a warning. Our revenge will not only hit the Nazis hiding in France." The group claimed responsibility, but French authorities could never prove their involvement. History doesn't repeat, it hides. Subscribe to Roger History, because the next story might be one you'll wish you hadn't missed.